What happens when a sanctuary becomes a scene of a bloodbath, a harrowing massacre? In 1906, the Battle of Bud Dajô unfolded on the island of Sulu, but it wasn't really a battle. It was a genocide, a chilling episode where almost 1,000 indigenous villagers were gruesomely massacred by the Americans. An unspeakable tragedy in the history of what is now the Philippines. But why is it that very few today have heard of this tragedy? Mabuhay, or in Kapampangan, luwid kayo. Welcome to my channel, it's me Kirby Áraullo, your friendly Pinoy historian. And in today's video, we'll dive deep into a forgotten chapter of Philippine and American histories. The tragic First Battle of Bud Dajô, also known as the Moro Crater Massacre. So without further ado, let's begin. Let's dig deeper into our people's untold history. Picture Bud Dajô, once a tranquil refuge, later the backdrop of unspeakable tragedy. Today, we explore this stark transformation, a narrative rich in courage, loss, and the undying spirit of resistance. Bud Dajô, rising above Jolo Island, is more than just a mountain. With its lush green slopes, Bud Dajô is a peaceful giant standing tall against the sky. This place with its deep forests and hidden paths was once a safe haven for the indigenous Tausug people. Throughout their history, they found peace and protection here, away from the troubles of the world. It held a great importance because of its location and the protection it offered. This mountain, with its breathtaking views and strategic importance, was a symbol of safety and resistance. It tells us of a story about a community, their connection to the land, their strength, and their struggle for peace in a turbulent time. Okay, now for some background, let's look at the seeds of the conflict. In the lush landscapes of Sulu and Mindanao, a story of resistance and struggle unfolded. It was a time when the Philippines, freshly under American rule after the Spanish-American War, found its new rulers eager to extend their influence over the Moro people, the diverse indigenous Muslim communities in the southern islands of Sulu and Mindanao. The Moros, known for their fierce independence, stood against the tide of American colonization, marking the beginning of a deep-rooted conflict, with its impact still being felt to this very day. Now unknown to many, despite centuries of Spanish colonization and conquest in the Philippines, the regions of Sulu and Mindanao remained steadfastly independent. And this is thanks to the fierce resistance of the Moro people. Their resilience against colonialism persisted until the Philippine-American War, marking the beginning of American conquest and a new chapter of struggle for the Moros, who fought to maintain their sovereignty and way of life. Now back to Sulu, Bud Dajô, a dormant volcano in Jolo, became more than just a natural landmark. It was a fortress for the indigenous Tausug people, a community caught in the crosshairs of imperial ambition. Here in Bud Dajô, amidst the dense jungles and steep slopes, the Tausug people sought refuge. It was a safe haven from the encroaching forces of a foreign power, and their stance was clear. It was not one of aggression, but of a determined plea for peace and the right to live freely on their ancestral land. But sadly, peace was far from reach. The American military under General Leonard Wood viewed the Moros' resistance as a challenge to their authority. Words like extermination began to surface, a chilling prelude to the violence that was to come. The Tausug people who sought refuge in Bud Dajô were merely seeking to protect their homes and their way of life. But sadly, they found themselves branded as rebels by the Americans, and their peaceful sanctuary in the crater of Bud Dajô was suddenly on the brink of becoming a battleground. This was a seed of conflict sown on the slopes of Bud Dajô, where American imperialist policies collided with the unwavering spirit of the indigenous Tausug people, a tale not just of confrontation, but of the enduring struggle for dignity, identity, and liberation. And as we dive deeper into the heart of Jolo, we find Bud Dajô, a silent guardian rising above. This mountain, once a shield against invaders, became a refuge for the indigenous Tausug people under the new threat of American imperialism. Now imagine families, their lives woven into the fabric of this land, seeking solace in the crater of Bud Dajô from the storm of American colonization. The indigenous Tausug, known for their strength, courage, and deep connection to the sea, found themselves at odds with imperialist policies and practices alien to their way of life. They sought not conflict, but the freedom to live on their own terms, in the lands of their ancestors. Now Bud Dajô, with its dense forests and hidden paths, has for centuries promised safety. It was a place to continue their traditions undisturbed. Now enter General Leonard Wood and the American military, viewing the Tausug Sanctuary in Bud Dajô not as a plea for peace, but as a defiance that needed to be crushed. To the Americans, the mountain's embrace was seen as a rebellion needing stern suppression, a rebellion that must be quelled at all cost. They need to be exterminated, the Americans said, setting the stage for a confrontation that would echo through history. Now unknown to many, the Tausug stand in Bud Dajô was more than just a fight for territory. It was a struggle for identity, for the right to decide their destiny. In the shadow of Bud Dajô, two worlds collided, one fighting to preserve their indigenous culture and the other pushing to expand its imperialism, igniting tensions that would lead to a tragic crescendo. By the way, if you are new to my channel, in this channel I make videos about our people's history, cultures, and everything in between. So if you want to support my channel and my research, please consider being my patron on Patreon or a member of my YouTube channel. You may also check out my books, coloring books, ebooks, and merch about the deep history and the diverse cultures of the Philippines, Southeast Asia, the diaspora, and beyond. And you may also show your support by simply liking this video, sharing this video to more people, and commenting down below, and of course, subscribing to my channel. Like honestly, every bit of support helps. Every bit of support is very much appreciated. Now back to our topic, what exactly happened in the crater of Bud Dajô? As dawn broke over Jolo, the tranquility of Bud Dajô was about to be shattered. American troops under the command of General Leonard Wood began their silent ascent towards the crater, a place where nearly 1,000 indigenous Tausug villagers had sought refuge. These were people who had chosen peace over conflict, cultivating their crops and living in harmony with the land they called home. The American military viewed Bud Dajô not just as a strategic challenge, but as a symbol of defiance against their authority. And as mentioned earlier, the mountain's rugged terrain with its steep slopes and dense forest made it a fortress in the truest sense. But unknown to the Americans, the indigenous Tausug people had an intricate network of trails, a testament to their deep connection with the land, which allowed them to move freely undetected and to keep their sanctuary safe. But on the morning of March 5th, 1906, the element of surprise was in the air. The Americans, equipped with heavy artillery, approached from all sides, ready to launch an assault that would go down in history for its sheer brutality. Sadly, the Tausug, unaware of the impending attack, found themselves encircled and trapped, their sanctuary about to become a battleground. Now imagine being one of the 900 indigenous villagers in Bud Dajô looking up as an army, armed with heavy artillery, surrounds their sanctuary from above. This moment of reflection brings us to the heart of the conflict, where the two worlds collided, one fighting for control and power, and the other fighting for the right to exist peacefully on their own ancestral land. And if we think about it, the siege of Bud Dajô was more than just a military operation. It was a clash of ideologies, a clash of cultures, a clash between an ambitious empire against the indigenous people. As the sun rose on March 7th, the silence of Bud Dajô was pierced by the first shots of what would become one of the darkest days in our history. The American forces positioned around the crater's rim, up above the villagers, began their assault on the unsuspecting Tausug villagers below. Sadly, within moments, the peaceful sanctuary of Bud Dajô turned into a scene of bloodbath, a scene of gruesome, unimaginable horror. The Americans had prepared for a decisive strike, underestimating the indigenous Tausug's resolve to protect their homes and families. The air filled with the sound of gunfire and the cries of the innocent. Men, women, and children, none were spared in the chaos that ensued. The battle quickly turned into a massacre, with the indigenous defenders outnumbered and outgunned, yet fighting valiantly against the overwhelming might of their attackers. Eyewitness accounts and historical records paint a grim picture of the 2 days that followed. The once vibrant community inside the crater was decimated, its people subjected to indiscriminate killing. The ground, soaked with the blood of innocent civilians, bore witness to the cruelty of the conflict, the cruelty of imperialism. Official records reported that the battle was fought with prodigious energy on both sides, a glorified report assuming that it was, as General Leonard would claim it to be, a dangerous armed rebellion. But the truth of the matter remains, it was not an armed rebellion. If anything, the indigenous Tausug encampment in Bud Dajô was an act of resistance, an act of survival, a seemingly harmless act that got into the nerves of the American general. General Leonard Wood himself was present at Bud Dajô, and ordered his men to kill or capture the 900, calling them savages. They made no distinction nor consideration for the innocent women, children, and the elderly. Using bayonets and 19th century machine guns, the Americans charged down on the surviving villagers. They slaughtered the people of Bud Dajô, one by one. Snipers targeted and shot down Moro defenders from afar, while those charging down the civilians below slashed their bodies into pieces. Like slashing down weeds and bushes, the people of Bud Dajô were mowed down to make way for American rule. The indigenous Tausug, known for their bravery, fought with everything they had, from the traditional weapons to sheer determination. But sadly, the advantage of modern heavy artillery was insurmountable. Now, in the wake of Bud Dajô, photographs of the gruesome massacre unveiled the tragedy's depth, steering a divided American public and challenging justifications of the battle. Yet, this story transcends conflict, embodying the indigenous Tausug people's profound resilience. And although met with adversity, their stand against imperialism to protect their people shines as a testament to their indomitable spirit and a beacon of their unwavering commitment to their roots. Now, before we continue, I just want to give a special shout out and a heartfelt thank you to the Sulu Cultural and Historical Society and to the University of the Philippines Institute of Islamic Studies. For all your hard work in uplifting the history and the culture of our people. Magsukol tuod kay mo. Now back to our topic, what exactly happened in the aftermath of the massacre in Bud Dajô? Now, in the wake of the harrowing events or the massacre at Bud Dajô, the American imperialist narrative sought to justify the massacre as a necessary action against rebellion, despite the fact that the villagers at Bud Dajô were peaceful, despite the fact that they were not rebels. They were simply seeking refuge away from the Philippine-American War, away from the bloodshed brought about by the American conquest of the Philippines. And this rationale, which in the modern day is basically, labeling the peaceful indigenous villagers as rebellious terrorists, was steeped in the era's prevalent racism, and it failed to acknowledge the profound injustice inflicted on the indigenous Tausug people. Now, this tragedy sparked outrage among notable figures in America, like Mark Twain, who vehemently criticized the imperialist actions, underscoring the moral dissonance between the ideals of liberty and the reality of oppression. Amid the outcry over the Moro Crater Massacre, W.E.B. Du Bois stood as a loud vocal critic against the imperialist actions of the United States. Du Bois, a central figure in the struggle for African-American civil rights, was particularly struck by the photograph capturing the massacre's aftermath. He found it not just shocking, but profoundly revealing. He described this haunting image as the most illuminating he's ever seen, a haunting testament to the massacre's brutality. Du Bois considered making this haunting image a permanent fixture in his classroom to starkly convey the grim realities of imperialism, the grim realities of wars of conquest to his students. Du Bois' perspective emphasizes the importance of solidarity, the importance of moral and intellectual resistance in confronting the injustices brought by American imperialism. His reaction underscores a broader, deeply felt opposition to imperialist endeavors, highlighting the moral and the intellectual resistance against the injustices of American expansionism. Okay, sidebar, this was not part of the original script, but unknown to many, after the massacre, despite the fact that we now have this gruesome picture of the aftermath, General Leonard Wood actually tried to burn all of the evidence, all of the photographs that exposes the gruesome and brutality of the massacre. In short, they tried their hardest to eliminate any evidence, anything that would expose how bad, how bloody and gruesome this massacre was of indigenous and peaceful innocent villagers. And another thing I forgot to mention earlier was that, unknown to many, General Leonard Wood actually got orders from Washington, D.C., from the White House itself, to hold back. He got orders not to attack, but he insisted on attacking and eliminating the innocent people seeking refuge in Bud Dajô. In fact, 99% of the people living in Bud Dajô were brutally massacred. Innocent women, children, and men and the elderly were butchered indiscriminately. If one were to even imagine, within just 1.5 days, an entire village of freedom-loving indigenous people were massacred in one of the worst acts of carnage in the history of the United States and the Philippines. Yet those who insisted to undertake such unnecessary bloodshed returned home to America as war heroes. General Leonard Wood, despite the shame of being the mastermind of the massacre, would be promoted and honored. In fact, between 1921 to 1927, he served as the governor of the entire Philippines. And again, the massacre at Bud Dajô marked one of the lowest points in the history of American imperialism. And along with the rape of a palit in Pampanga in 1899 and the atrocities surrounding the Balanghiga Massacre in Samar in 1901, the senseless bloodshed that descended upon the people of Bud Dajô remains largely forgotten in our mainstream consciousness. These massacres were not in the slightest way absolutely necessary in securing tactical military victory over the islands, but they were indeed necessary in advancing U.S. imperialism and in decimating the indomitable spirit of the indigenous people. The so-called Battle of Bud Dajô revealed one of the worst phases of American presence in the Philippines. It was said that the bullets the Americans used against the Moros were soaked in pig's blood. It was their intention not just to harm the Moros, but also to humiliate and insult the spirituality and culture of the people. The legacy of Bud Dajô is a somber reminder of the long-term effects of such violence has on communities like Sulu and Mindanao. The indigenous Tausug people's resilience in the face of continuous struggle speaks volumes of their enduring spirit and the importance of remembering Bud Dajô as more than just a footnote in history, but as a testament to the necessity of acknowledging our past, no matter how uncomfortable, to ensure that the lessons learned guide us towards a more just and empathetic understanding of our people's shared history. And as we reflect on the echoes of Bud Dajô, let's remember the cost of freedom and the price of silence. It's a call to honor those who stood firm in their beliefs, and a reminder of the continuous journey towards acknowledging and rectifying the wrongs of history. And if you think about it, the massacre at Bud Dajô is not just a chapter of the past, but it's a continuous narrative that demands our attention and our action to ensure that such tragedies are never forgotten nor repeated. In the echoes of Bud Dajô, we find lessons that reach far beyond its time, resonating with today's global struggles. This haunting historical bloodshed in Sulu reminds us of the brutal impact of imperialism and the dehumanization it entailed. Sadly, the echoes of the past resonate in the present day, such as in the plight of the Palestinian people trapped in the midst of a genocide. Just as the people of Sulu endured dehumanization in their homeland, the Palestinians now bear the relentless burden of imperialism and genocide. The heart-wrenching devastation and loss of innocent lives, whether in Bud Dajô or in Gaza today, urge us to advocate for justice and to strive for lasting peace. Remembering Bud Dajô is not just about honoring the past, but it's a call to action, a call for empathy, a call for understanding, and the pursuit of genuine peace in our world today. So let us draw inspiration from the resilience witnessed at Bud Dajô and the solidarity that unfolded in its aftermath. Let us draw inspiration to stand up against oppression. And together we must carry forward the legacy of the indigenous Tausug people, not in the spirit of vengeance, but with a commitment to forging a world that genuinely honors the dignity and peace deserved by every soul. Because honestly, whether we reflect on the tragedy and the bloodshed in Bud Dajô back in 1906 or on the ongoing bloodshed in Gaza today, we all share a responsibility. No matter our religion, regardless of our ethnicity, we all share a responsibility to stand up for justice and lasting peace. Because no matter where we are in the world, we need to ensure that such tragedies of the past must never be repeated. And that is it for me today, but if you want to deepen your understanding about today's topic, check out my book, Black Lives and Brown Freedom, Untold Histories of War, Solidarity, and Genocide. And in this book, I have an entire chapter dedicated to the Battle of Bud Dajô and many other forgotten chapters of the Philippine-American War, from Luzon to the Visayas and Mindanao. Like the rape of a palit in Pampanga and the Balanghiga Massacre in Samar. Your support for the book will also support my continued research and storytelling and uplifting our people's untold histories. So make sure to check out the links below to order your copies today. Dakal pong salamat! And of course, one last thing before I go, thank you to all my patrons, subscribers, and viewers like you throughout these years. Your unwavering support and love throughout these years is the backbone of this channel. Maraming salamat po, or in Kapampangan, dakal pong salamat, and in Bahasa Sug, magsukol tuod kay mo. See you next time, or in Tagalog, kita-kits, and in Kapampangan, mikitiks, and in Bahasa Sug, balik isab!